evening everyone. Thank you very much and welcome to the West Dorset Husting live from Beminster. I'm your host for this evening. My name is Rachel Good, and firstly we're going to cover some housekeeping first of all. So we're not expecting a fire alarm as a practice for this evening, so if you do hear an alarm, that's real. And so therefore we need you to exit calmly and leave. There's a fire exit at the back and one just here. For those of you that are watching at home, if your fire alarm goes off, it's probably because the bacon's burnt. So that's what a beautiful daughter was doing it anyway. Sorry, Lucy, if you watch it. So, let's crack on. I'm going to talk about the format of this evening's hustings. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes to introduce themselves and then 2 minutes at the end to wrap up. The questions have been submitted in advance by members of the public, and they have been slightly amended to make it fit the format, and any personal information has been removed. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the question. When they have 30 seconds left, we're going to see a bit of a disturbance from the side here. And then when the time is up, a loud bell will ring. Perfectly demonstrated. So thank you for that. So, guidelines for the audience. Thank you very much for coming this evening. Clapping and the like is welcomed, but heckles, booing or shouting over the panel is not. Please be respectful of all our guests and especially the host. That's me. If you are, not that I'm a diva, I've already said that. If you're watching online, please do like, share and comment, but please think about others who are reading that. If you need to leave the hall for a toilet break or any other reason, please leave and return through the door at the rear. Phones on silent, preferably off completely, and also we're going to crack straight on. So here we go. Here's question 1. Oh, sorry.
Introductions.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought everyone was going to introduce themselves. That's fine. But yes, we're going to start off then. Sorry, down the end. Representing the Liberal Democrats, we've got Edward Morello.
Are we doing intro or am I just saying
Intro.
Oh, okay, right, great. So, hello, my name's Edward Morello. I am the Lib Dem candidate for West Dorset, as I was in 2019. My wife and I live down the road in Bridport. Our 6-year-old son goes to the local primary. I work in renewable energy. I'm an environmentalist. And I'm running for Parliament basically because I'm fed up with the way we've been doing politics for the last few years. I'm fed up with a government that is prioritising the profits of water companies over our natural environment, the profits of energy companies over you and I, and the supermarkets over farmers. I believe that after years of mismanagement, the NHS is on its knees. We are a desert for NHS dentistry in West Dorset, and fundamentally I just believe we can do politics better than we've been managing to do for the last 4 or 5 years. I think we need to be working together to end the sewage that's being released in our rivers and beaches, to fix the NHS and our care system so that we can see a GP, so that you can get an operation when you need it, so that you can get a dentist appointment without having to go to Portsmouth, that we can together tackle the cost of living crisis and the climate crisis, and fundamentally just do things better. So that's why I'm running for Parliament. I'm running for Parliament because I want a better deal for Britain and a better deal for West Dorset.
Thank you. Kelvin Clayton, please, Green Party.
Good evening. Yes, Kelvin Clayton, the Green Party candidate. This is the 3rd time I've stood at a general election. I also live in Bridport. I'm a councillor on Bridport Town Council, and up until recently I was a councillor on Dorset Council. Before entering politics, I was a firefighter for a large number of years. When I left, I went to university as a mature student, and following that I retrained as a careers advisor. And following those 2 episodes, I'm quite passionate about our public services. I've been a member of the Green Party since 2010. I've also twice been a member of the Labour Party, I must confess. But I was quite despondent after the result of the 2010 general election, and purely by chance I stumbled upon the Green Party manifesto, and it was far more radical, had far more about equality and social justice than anything I'd seen in the Labour Party for years. And I must confess, at the time, the climate wasn't really an issue for me, but it's quickly become one. In fact, I would go on to say it's probably the most important issue we face, and we need to address it. But no doubt I shall be saying more of that later.
Thank you. Let's move on then to Marcus White. Everyone is God Party.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name's Marcus White. I'm the leader of Britain's newest and most radical party, Everyone is God. I was raised on a farm in Dorset, and I've lived here nearly all my life. So I just want to start by posing a very simple question. If we look over the 5,000-year history of mankind, we've been wrestling with the same problems we've always had. We have war, we have violence, we have corruption, we have disparity in wealth, and we have a lack of funds to sort out the problems we have. We've had the same issues throughout our entire history, and we haven't solved any of them. The question arises, why is that? We believe it's because politics does not go deep enough. Politics is not driven by politics, it's driven by human beings. And human beings are driven by psychology. And it's our psychology is that driving all the problems we have. If we want to resolve our politics, we've first got to resolve human nature. So we are a very radical party. We want to reconstruct society from the ground up. And I always make a very bold claim. We have 30 policies, over 30 policies, which are very radical, and we believe will solve every problem we have in British politics. And if you are in any doubt about that, I encourage you to go on our website and read these policies for yourself. It's www.everyoneisgod.co.uk. So all our policies seek to get to the root cause of problems, and you'll see in my answers tonight that I will always be digging deeper, and I will want to look at the root cause that's behind every issue, and that is what we target. We want to solve root cause, so we solve these problems forever. These policies start with parenting, which we want to make sure is regulated and supported. If parenting is not done right, this is where all the problems start, and they will lead through into everything else. And prison's full of people, criminals, who've had appalling upbringings, and we need to resolve this root cause problem throughout society. Our policies go right through education, and we want to completely restructure the way education is done, and we want to teach young people how to be prepared for adult life rather than how to pass exams. And then it goes through all other parts of society, the way we govern it, the way we carry out business, the way our economy works, and the way we govern the country through government. So we have radical policies that want to change all these things. So I'm standing as an independent because our party registration didn't come through in time, and you'll see me as Marcus White, independent, on the ballot paper. So thank you very much, and I look forward to answering your questions later.
Thank you. Chris Loader, Conservative Party, please.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Loader. I'm the Conservative candidate standing in the general election, and of course have been our MP here for the last 4.5 years. In case you don't know, I'm a farmer's son. My mum and dad farm between Sherborne and Dorchester, where I was brought up on our family farm. I was born in Sherborne, and I went to the Griffin School in Sherborne before I commenced a 20-year career with the railways before being elected for the first time in 2019. The key reason as to why I wish to stand again is because for me, being the MP for my home, for our community here in West Dorset, means a great deal to me, and you will be able to see from my track record over the last 4.5 years the number of things that I haven't indeed done and I would like to continue to do. Some of those things include getting the £62.5 million needed for Dorchester Hospital, also supporting the return of the post office here in Bedminster. I'm a regular visitor at the schools here in Bedminster. I was actually only a few days ago at St Mary's Academy here to visit the children. But I also am very much aware that we have one of the most important special schools actually based here in Bedminster, and that of course is Mountjoy. Mountjoy does an incredible job, and one of the things I have been campaigning on, and one of the things I want to continue to be able to campaign on, is actually enlarging Mountjoy School, because you will probably all know that there is a clear constraint on the number of pupils there, and we want to expand that to make that better for local families and for the children who need to use it. But more widely, you will probably also know that a good number of young children here don't wish to go to university. And I didn't go to university either, and I know full well that organisations like Leonardo Helicopters are big employers in this area, and a lot of children that leave Bedminster School go to work there, and that's one of the reasons also why I've been so supportive of the new medium-sized helicopter contract coming to Yeovil to support employment opportunities. So I think I'll probably save the other points till a little bit later.
Thank you. Okay, so are we ready?
Madam Chairman, could I ask all candidates please to speak up a bit, because we have a fan at the back of the hall, which certainly we can hear. Perhaps you can't hear quite so much.
Of course,
And
yes.
I'd like more authority.
Yeah, that's absolutely, yes. So speak louder, chaps, please. That would be fabulous. Okay, if we're ready then for the first question. It has been NHS, dentists and pharmacists. It has been reported that pharmacists like the one in Bedminster is at risk of closing. GP surgeries are short of doctors and NHS dentists are not to be seen here. What will each candidate do as our local MP to address this issue, including increasing the access to face-to-face appointments with doctors and dentists? And I think we will kick things off, please. Kelvin.
Thank you. When it comes to the NHS, my first reaction is we've got to stop creeping privatisation of our health service and dentistry. There needs to be a massive investment. One of the problems at the moment is holding on to staff. We haven't got a problem so much training staff, it's holding on to them. They train, they start working for the NHS, then they leave to work abroad where they can earn more money. At the moment, 1 in 11 roles in hospital and 1 in 10 in social care is vacant. We need to address this. Junior doctors' pay has in real terms been cut by 26% between 2008 and 2021. That is not the way to treat our junior doctors. And the same applies with dentistry. I'm part of a practice in Bridport, and about a year or so ago I was informed that I had to go private. It's the only way I could see a dentist. I asked why, and basically it's because dentists could not afford to deliver what the NHS were prepared to pay. It's got to change. Sorry.
Thank you. Marcus, please.
So I'm going to answer the question in the most general sense, because solving the problem locally is the same as solving it nationally. It's exactly the same issue. So at the biggest scale, there's essentially 3 things you can do to sort the NHS out. The first thing is you can put more money into it. The second thing is you can make the service more efficient, so you get more healthcare for that money. And the third thing you can do is reduce the demand for the NHS. Now, in terms of more money, this links to our economy. All the money we need for the NHS, which is a huge sum of money, comes from our economy. And we need to make our economy efficient to supply that money for our public services. And there's not the time here, but we have 17 policies on our website to completely restructure the economy. We believe it's only operating at 50% of its peak efficiency. So the second thing is greater efficiency in the NHS. One of the things we'd like to do is to attach to a major hospital a research centre that is tasked with finding out exactly how to make greater efficiencies in the NHS and looking through all their systems, particularly their administrative systems, and reducing the burden of administration staff so that that money can be spent on doctors and nurses. And finally, a very important point which is very rarely talked about with the NHS, which is reducing the demand for it, i.e. making people healthier. There's a huge link between stress and lifestyle and health. And if we want to see broad education through school about how to have more healthy lives and manage stress better so that we have less disease and less demand on the NHS.
Thank you. Edward, please, if you could speak up, that would be great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so there's a couple of elements to this. Ultimately, it takes 10 years to train a GP. 10 years to train a GP, it takes 8 years to train a dentist. So anyone who's managing solutions out of their back pocket right now is full of it. Ultimately, we need a long-term plan in order to start building capacity back into the NHS. There are some short-term solutions that we can do. So, for example, we can get rid of the current NHS dentistry contract and get a new one which pays dentists an actual amount needed in order to open up NHS dentistry appointments. So that's a short-term solution that will create some additional capacity. We would also set up a rural GPs fund to subsidise GPs working in rural communities, because right now it's more expensive to live in West Dorset and be a GP here than it is elsewhere or stay in a big city. So we've got to recognise that we're going to have to pay slightly more to bring people here. So if we want to attract talent, we're going to have to pay slightly more, and that's why we have a specific fund for rural GPs. More broadly though, you need to look at the NHS, and I believe that there is growing consensus now in the need for a Royal Commission to actually set a 20-year strategy for the NHS. Take the politicians out of it, because politicians are scared of the NHS. It's the third rail of politics, and they're worried about taking the tough decisions. So actually remove the politicians from it, have a Royal Commission, set a 20-year strategy, and all political parties should agree that they will adhere to whatever the suggestions are of that commission, and they will simply provide the funding for it. And that way we have a long-term plan for resolving these issues.
Thank you. Chris, please.
So the Conservative Party in our manifesto are committing to having another 28,000 doctors recruited and another 92,000 nurses to help with the difficulties and challenges of which we see. But I think we need to be focusing on much more in terms of the short term, here and now, and what we'd like to see come forward within the next year or so. I've had several meetings actually with the local surgeries here in Bedminster to understand exactly what their key issues are and to help them where I can to find solutions to some of those difficulties, and they are many and varied. I'd like to cover the pharmacy point, if I may, because many of you will know that only a few months ago that the pharmacist here said that the pharmacy was at risk of closure, or he would have to increase the prices or the fees that were here in Bedminster Pharmacy. And I just wanted to say that I don't actually think that that was right and proper to do that or to say that. As far as I'm of the understanding, the pharmacy is not at risk of closure at all. That is partly because of the Conservative government's Pharmacy First plan, of which almost all pharmacies in West Dorset have signed up to, including the one here. And we've seen the sister pharmacy here to the Bedminster one in Sherborne actually expand in recent months. So I think for a business that was particularly supposedly at risk of closure, I'm not sure that is actually the case. But I just want to give you my every assurance that we will not let the pharmacy close here, and indeed I think it will actually go on to grow and expand and thrive with the new Pharmacy First programme.
Okay, moving on to the next question about housing then. Empty homes, i.e. second homes or holiday homes, is a huge issue in some villages. How will this issue be addressed to help local people, and how can we get more affordable housing built for local people? So this one, I think we're going to go back to Chris, please, and then we'll go to Kelvin straight after.
So I'm very much opposed to the mass developments that have been proposed or are proposed currently in West Dorset. So, for example, the enormous 3,500 house development to the north of Dorchester, or the 1,500 development that's being proposed to the west of Sherborne. I'm absolutely opposed to them. I think it's wrong, but that doesn't mean to say I don't think we need more housing, because we do. The policy that currently exists says, for here in Dorset, that new housing should only be built in sustainable areas. Sustainable areas are deemed those that, for example, are on mains gas supply, have a public transport link and so on. But it is my opinion that the villages across West Dorset that are denied the ability to have an additional 15, 20, 25 houses actually become less sustainable as a result. And that is why I'm such a proponent of having many more but smaller and more modest developments across the constituency, rather than 2 or 3 very large ones in specific areas. I think one of the ways we can address this, make this happen, is through the Community Land Trust initiative. It's highly successful in many areas. The downside, though, is it takes too long, and we need to speed that up. And if I was returned as your MP, I would do all I can to make sure that that process is shortened and expedited as soon as possible. The point about second homes and empty homes being a burden and a difficulty here, the Conservative government has taken steps in order to discourage that, and already we have passed a law to double the council tax for second homes, and of course for homes that remain empty, that will also happen for those properties that remain empty for 1 year or more, in order to disincentivise that happening.
Kelvin, please.
Thank you. One of the sad things about housing is that over the recent years they've become seen more as an investment than as an actual home. We need to start building the right homes in the right place for the right price. And dare I say, we need to focus on social housing. The big need, particularly in West Dorset, is for 1 and 2 bedroom homes for rent, not 3 and 4 bedroom houses to make huge profits for the developers. We need to have rent controls. And I personally would fight, although it's not Green Party policy, for local councils to start building their own council housing. Alongside a change of emphasis, or to allow such a change of emphasis to occur in housing, we need to radically reform the planning system. We need to put control back in local authorities rather than with developers as it is at the moment. We need to start seeing homes as something for local people, not as something, an investment to make huge amounts of money for developers. Thank you.
Thank you. Edward, please.
Yeah, I think we're all broadly in agreement on this. I don't want to see large-scale developments. They don't come with the necessary infrastructure. They're not the right types of houses that we need for local people. I'd much rather see small-scale developments around the villages, sub-15 houses to help keep the villages alive. There are circa 900 long-term vacant properties in Dorset that the council has the power to seize and repurpose and reintroduce to the housing stock. We also need to stop second homes, so something like 1 in 6 houses, not last year, the year before, were sold as second homes in Dorset. That's removing an enormous amount of the housing stock every year, so we need to clamp down on that. We need to rapidly increase building social housing. I want the council to be building houses. The Lib Dem target is 150,000 new social homes a year, and those are targeted at local people who can then afford to get onto the housing ladder or afford to rent, because ultimately, you know, if people want to be able to stay in West Dorset where they grow up, we need to be able to provide a bottom rung to the housing ladder so people can get started. I would also like to see reform of the planning rules. You know, there are plenty of farmers out there who are struggling to get permission to repurpose buildings on their land for their workers, and we should be making that much easier to happen. So there's lots of seemingly common sense and easy things that we can do. It just requires the political will to do it.
Thank you, Marcus, please.
So I think, as Ed said, there is a lot of broad agreement with this, and I'd agree pretty much with all the points made, so I won't repeat those. Just another aspect to this, which I don't think's looked at often. As I said, we're a party that wants to solve problems at their root cause. And what we would like to see is a complete stabilisation in the need for housing, so that we no longer need to actually build any new homes at all, and this problem goes once and for all. We're about solving problems forever, and simply that is not actually that difficult to achieve. Our natural population in this country is reducing. It's immigration that is making it rise. We would like to see an immigration policy where the population in the country, we still allow people in, but it's at a rate that keeps our population stable or very slightly reducing. And if you do this, then ultimately you won't need any more homes and the problem's finally solved forever. Of course, affordable housing, all the points the guys have made on top of that.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next question. Now, I believe the person that's asked this question is in the room, and that's Joe. So this is about education and SEND children, or special educational needs children. Dorset is one of the worst performers in national standards in education. Should we further penalise parents and inhibit children in our constituency by taxing education? And how will you ensure all children in our constituency have the best education possible, state or private? And how will you tackle the crisis of inadequate funding and provision for children with SEND who will be affected by taxing education? Let's start off with Marcus, please, and then we'll go to Edward. Thank you.
So it's quite a long question, and there's actually a lot of different questions in there, and there's no way I can answer all of them in 2 minutes. I'm going to focus, just if I may, on just one area, but I'm sure that the other guys will make a lot of good points about the other areas. I want to talk about SEND. So, like I said, we're a party that goes for root cause, and we've seen what looks like almost an explosion in special needs. Why is that? Well, I've done a lot of research in psychology. My partner has a degree in it. We study this relentlessly because we believe psychology is at the root of the problems we have, and politics. Now, a lot of the special needs you're seeing, these children that are autistic or they've got ADHD, we believe a lot of that is due to the way they're brought up and trauma in their early years. If parenting is carried out correctly, you will reduce the incidence of these conditions these children have. And there's a direct link between trauma and the conditions they're demonstrating. They're psychological conditions. And there's a huge room for improvement. We want to see parenting taught through schools, it become a deep area of knowledge for all people, and that it's regulated and supported so that all children are brought up correctly, and you're going to reduce the incidence of autism and these special educational needs that you have.
Edward, please.
Yeah, so we're against the tax on education. It's grossly unfair. We don't tax any form of education at the moment, so introducing it is deeply regressive. We want to massively and dramatically increase funding for SEND and SEND provision. We want to provide far greater support for teachers more generally. So actually, we all of the evidence shows that outcome for pupils only starts to improve after a teacher has been qualified for 4 years, and year 4 is the point at which we tend to lose most teachers from the profession. So actually, paying teachers more to retain them and keep that knowledge and the improved outcome is vital. It's far cheaper than just constantly talking about training new teachers. So we need to do a better job of providing support for teachers, and especially for teachers' assistants as well, which at the moment the budgets for which are incredibly stretched, and they're being asked to do more and more of teachers' jobs. The other thing that we need to do is improve support for carers, because an important part of children with special educational needs is the support that their carers need. So the vast majority of care is provided unpaid by a female member of the family, and that is grossly unfair on the family. So we would look to provide far greater support for unpaid carers by actually improving the stipend that they receive, but also having mandatory paid for respite, where we'd send in a carer to provide them with holiday. And then in care more generally, we'd also increase the carer's wage by £2, so to make it a more attractive profession, to attract more people into that sector.
Thank you. Chris, please.
So, thank you for the very important questions. The first thing is I'm absolutely opposed to the tax on independent schooling. That's not just because we have more than our fair share of independent schools here in West Dorset, particularly Sherborne and just outside Sherborne and Dorchester. But I'm also very well aware that some parents of children with special educational needs choose to take their children to, say, Sunninghill Prep, for example. And I think it is absolutely horrendously wrong that we are faced with a possibility of that happening after the general election, not from my party, but from the Labour Party. Now, in terms of the funding for schools, so especially for special educational needs schools, the funding has, over the last Parliament, gone up 60% to £1 billion. But that clearly hasn't gone far enough here. You know, the fact that Mountjoy has kind of basically reached capacity is something that needs urgent addressing. Part of the Conservative Party's manifesto commitment is that we would build 15 additional special educational needs schools, and I just want to let you and everybody else know that I have already made those representations that one of those schools are actually here in Bedminster to be a brand new school here just up the road.
Kelvin, please.
Thank you. Green Party policy is to bring academies and free schools back under local authority control. Under local authority control, your elected councillors have control of what's happening locally. We would review assessment targets and put a lot more emphasis on arts and vocational subjects, treating them equally with academic subjects, and ending formal testing in primary and secondary school. SEND students need far more funding and support. Green Party certainly would support more funding, and it would pay or employ a qualified counsellor in every school so that it's available for all students. We would also invest £1.4 billion a year in the Sure Start centres. Speaking personally, I would like to see a lot more emphasis again on the careers service, which since I left being a careers advisor has practically been decimated in schools. When it all adds up, lack of counsellors, lack of careers guidance, there is just no support for our young people. And if I could throw in just one thing, it's slightly off question, that I would like to see brought into education, and that is the teaching of critical thinking. I would like to see our young people taught to think critically about the issues facing them.
Thank you. Our next question is on climate and environmental. I swim in Lyme Regis. I don't. This is from the other person. This is from the person who wrote the question. This person swims in Lyme Regis. In the local elections this year, much was promised on cleaning up our rivers and seas, but nothing has been announced by the new council on this despite these pledges. Now leaflets are promising the same things again. What will the candidates really do about cleaning up our water? And we'll go to Edward first, please, and then over to Chris.
Well, look, a quick defence of the council. The councillors were only appointed 4.5 weeks ago, and they've been busy getting their training, and also campaigning for me. So It is high on their list of priorities, as it is for all of us, because last year we had 45,000 hours of sewage released into our rivers and onto our beaches. And I know we're mentioning Lyme Regis here. There's a false belief that it's a coastal issue. Some of the worst polluted areas are way inland. So Sidling, St Nicholas, Maiden Newton, Martinstown all have the 3 highest levels of releases. The River Lim was declared ecologically dead last year by environmentalists taking measurements there. So, we have repeatedly sought to introduce legislation in Parliament that would have prevented this from happening. It's been repeatedly voted down by the government. We have a plan which is to ban executive bonuses. We would introduce a sewage tax. We would convert the companies, the monopoly utility companies, and this isn't just water, this is energy as well. We'd convert them into public benefit companies, which would then limit their profit and maximise the amount that they have to reinvest into upgrading the systems, the sewage systems and the networks. And frankly, if they don't like that new model, they can hand back the utility companies to us.
Okay. Chris.
So I'd just like to talk firstly a little bit about our track record in terms of what we've done over the last few years in this respect. In 2010, there was a 7% monitoring of our sewage outlets. Today, because of the Environment Act that we brought in 2021, all of those discharge points are monitored 100% of the time. So what it's actually done is it's allowed us to shine a light on the extent of the real issue, so we can take real action, which is indeed what we have done. And some of that real action is a storm overflows reduction plan, which in total across the country comes to £56 billion. But as we're talking about Lyme Regis and the River Lim, there is specifically a commitment on South West Water to invest £20 million to actually address the issues in the River Lim. And we should just bear in mind that of 100% of the pollution, broadly speaking, 40% is from sewage, 40% is agricultural runoff, and 20% is highways runoff. So it's not always as straightforward as we think. But we have also undertaken a number of other initiatives in terms of banning bonuses, for example, for water companies, and also putting in many measures that Ofwat will be able to enforce for those who fail their environmental targets. Now, I'd just finally like to say that when it comes to voting on these matters in Parliament, I'd just like to share with everybody that on the 25th of April last year, there was a debate with a motion where basically the House called on the government to set a target for the reduction of sewage discharges. And for the record, I voted in support of that motion, but the Liberal Democrats and the Labour Party both opposed it at the vote, and that was on the 25th of April, if you'd like to check it.
Thank you. Kelvin, please.
Access to clean water is a basic human need. It should not be in the hands of private companies who make profit out of giving us water and disposing of our waste. Green Party policy is to take the for-profit water companies back into public control, so we've got proper control over what they deliver. Now, there is a large amount of investment needed. As other candidates will say, we often have a single sewerage system for surface water and foul water, which causes a problem as when you have heavy rain. And as the climate gets worse or increases in temperature, there's going to be more heavy rain. It's going to become more of a problem. So we need a massive investment to get a dual system in place. Additionally, and this isn't Green Party policy, I would like to see the introduction of an environmental rights bill to make it enshrined in law that is our right to clean water. Now, if you go onto West Dorset Friends of the Earth's Facebook page, you might just see a photograph of me sitting on a toilet by a river with a little sign saying, can we say this? No shit. I said it, okay. I can always retract it. Doing something like that would make it a legal requirement that we have access to clean air, clean water, but it would also make it far easier for people like yourselves to take action against the companies for not delivering. Thank you.
Thank you. Marcus, please.
So, as Calvin said, separation of rainwater from the sewage system is crucial, because when we have storms, the system can't cope with it, and that's what's causing these discharges. Achieving that, as has already been said, costs a lot of money nationwide. And any funding issue like this will go back to the point I made about economy. We need a healthy economy in order to provide that money. And that is the root of where we get our funding from all our projects. So we need a healthy economy. There's some other things that can be done. You need to protect your waterways from the runoff from farms and roads, and we need green margins along all waterways to achieve that. I agree, I don't think water companies should be profit making, but we need to ensure that they're efficient if they do go back into public ownership. Efficiency in these services is always a problem with public ownership. And finally, we need to regulate all businesses and make sure they are not polluting.
Thank you. Our next question is about tactical voting. Tactical voting here suggests Lib Dems. But at the Bridport Husting, Edward said that he would prefer a Labour government. Labour have nothing to say for rural communities or farmers like the person that's written the question. I think Chris is a good local MP, but feel that the Tory party is finished. Do I vote for the best local person, regardless of party, or just think Westminster over local representation? Now I'm going to start with Kelvin, please.
Thank you. What did you pick on me?
Because your name's not mentioned.
I've said this before at other hustings. I'm finding this election quite strange in many respects, because often the elephant in the room is tactical voting. It hasn't cropped up at all hustings, but you just sense it there, standing huge in the background. And I understand it, I really do. But I've got concerns, not least of which because effectively it's negative voting. It's voting for what you don't want rather than what you do want. I'm also concerned about it properly registering the support of smaller parties. Now, even if the Green Party doesn't improve on its current polling of roughly 6%, do you know what 6% means in House of Commons terms? It means 38 MPs. We're not going to get anywhere close to that. But 38 Green MPs in Parliament could make a real difference. And if you, in your heart, support the Green Manifesto and support the Green ideas, isn't it right and proper that there should be someone in Parliament representing those views? And my third concern is, okay, so you vote tactically, you get rid of the Tories, that's the big chant. What then? What happens at the next election? Is there going to be pressure to a resurgent Tories stop them getting back in and vote tactically again? Does that continue? Does it just keep marginalising the smaller parties so they get a smaller and smaller voice? Is that democracy?
Thank you. I'm going to go to Marcus, and then we'll then finish with Chris and Edward to address as their names are on. So Marcus, this is for you.
It's a tricky question, and obviously ultimately it's up to people how they want to vote. I think you need to work on the basis that the overall majority in Parliament, whoever that is sort of aligned with the individual MPs that they run, and you should vote for whoever you want to be in power. And it's just that simple. I just don't see any other answer to the question.
Thank you. Chris, please.
So it's probably no surprise that I'm not advocating tactical voting. But I do understand where the questioner is coming from. The reality is that if the polls are to believe, we are expecting a change of government. And should that happen, especially bearing in mind that the Labour Party have put only 87 words in its manifesto about rural Britain, farming and rural Britain, what we need to make sure is that we have as robust an opposition as possible, with representation that is grounded and well experienced and has a good track record, as I do, to represent our voice here and to bring that to Westminster and to challenge the government of the day. Because if we do see a Labour government elected on the 4th of July, it's not going to be good news for us here. I'm sorry the Labour candidate's not here, but I don't believe it's going to be good news for us. Some would say it never has been good news for us. But when there is such a small part of the manifesto about it, the Labour Party manifesto about it, when we know, especially in West Dorset, the Labour Party manifesto is looking to decimate independent schools across this constituency, and I could go on, we know that we need a very strong voice against that. And I hope that you will all have seen the work that I have done over the last 4.5 years, and that you would be minded to support me as your MP on the 4th of July.
Thank you. Edward.
Well, let's clear up one thing. I would not prefer a Labour government. I would prefer a Lib Dem government. But even I, am not so detached from reality that I think that the Liberal Democrats are going to win 360 seats at the next election. So, look, we do have to face the reality there is likely to be a Labour government, and then it is a matter of who is best to represent West Dorset. I think what is interesting about this election is we're going to see rural Britain actually break its multi-generational, slightly abusive relationship with the Conservative Party, because they've looked at the Conservative Party's track record for rural Britain over the last 5-10 years and are wondering why they should vote for them at all when they seem to keep selling them down the river. So, what we will hopefully end up with is a very large Liberal Democrat rural voting bloc in Parliament, because places like Tiverton and Honiton and Somerton and Frome and Chippenham and South Cotswolds and West Dorset, are very similar in terms of their demographic and their industry and their geography. And actually, what we will hopefully have is a large block of Southwest Liberal MPs representing rural Britain and defending it against what will be a very urban-centric Labour Party that's going to come in. And actually, I think when you look at the Lib Dem manifesto, it is actually one that's based around supporting rural Britain. It's very focused on our rural community. We're the only party with a national food strategy, and I think actually we will see a resurgent Lib Dems in the southwest.
Thank you. Our next question, we're going to go to Chris first. So this is Brexit. In 2019, the general election campaign was all about Brexit. However, this general election is hardly mentioned by any of the main parties. What will you do to deliver on Brexit, particularly in West Dorset, where the cost of food is higher to buy or to grow? And do you think shortage of European labour to pick our crops here on our farms? So Chris, please, and then Kelvin.
Thank you. Just in terms of context, here in West Dorset, 97% of our businesses are small or micro-sized. 20% of the businesses here are farming or agriculture related. So if we were to turn back the clock, when we were members of the European Union, probably it's really important to note that 50% of the EU agricultural budget went to only 10% of farmers. And that's because 50% went to the largest farmers. Now, here in West Dorset, yes, we do have some larger farmers, but predominantly we are talking about, like my mum and dad, smaller farmers, probably tenant farmers with 100, 150, 200 acre farms. And so the benefits here for farmers in West Dorset is much starker and clearer when it comes to these issues. And I should just say that in that respect, we need to just recognise that 98% of all of our imports, when it comes to beef, which quite often we talk about in the context of it not being a good thing to have beef from other countries on the shelves to compete with our British farmers, 98% of all that import actually came from Europe. So we just need to I think bear all of that in mind. But finally, I'll just say one of the biggest things that has worked for us is that we've been able to stop live export of animals from the UK to the European Union and further, because animals were deemed actually as a good, i.e. as in goods and services. And I am so pleased that I have been one of the MPs to drive this through to stop it.
Kelvin, please.
Okay, I'll be honest with you. I don't want to deliver on Brexit. And yes, I do think there is a shortage of European labour. I think it's been a disaster. And if I had any say in the matter, I would campaign to rejoin Europe. Do you remember what was going to happen? What was the flags? We can forget trading with Europe. We can strike up wonderful trade deals with places like Australia. Just think about it. In terms of climate, if nothing else, transporting and trading, importing and exporting goods between us and Australia, does that make sense when there is such a market right on our doorstep? Sorry, it's complete madness, and it's been an utter failure as far as I'm concerned.
Marcus, please.
So, Brexit is a lot to do with trade, obviously, with Europe, and I think it should be an absolute fundamental principle of all trade, and I mean at any scale, whether it's local, national, international, across the globe, whatever scale it is, it should always be free trade. Goods should pass around freely. Now, when I say free trade, there still needs to be regulation that certain standards are met, but I think we need to always hold this principle of free trade, that goods should pass freely without specific trade deals or treaties or taxes, import-export taxes. This is not healthy for national and world economy. So I think we really need to embed this idea of the best trade is free trade, and everything should then come to a level playing field. And this principle should be applied to Brexit and all the trade that's done around the planet. I think it's immensely important to protect farming in this country and ensure food security. We've seen, obviously, the war in Ukraine affecting commodity prices here and how vulnerable we are to international events. And I think we need to make sure farmers can make a fair profit from producing food in this country, and we need very carefully tuned subsidies to make sure that happens. Subsidies that are not abused and do not cause butter mountains or whatever, but they just ensure farmers can make an honest living.
Thank you. Finally, Edward, please.
Yeah, I mean, look, from a Lib Dem perspective, there's a very good reason we're not talking about Brexit, and that's because the Conservative Party would love us to be talking about Brexit. They would love this to be another election where we just argue about Brexit and don't talk about the Conservative track record over the last 5 years. Ultimately, we are outside of the EU. I may not be happy about it, it may not have been my choice, but I do recognise that we cannot afford another 5 years of arguing about this. It is our patriotic duty right now to be making the best of the fact that we are outside of it. In the long term, that may change, I don't know, but right now, we need to be focused on doing what we can to stimulate economic growth, to try and recover some of the economic damage that's been done. So one of the major areas, or the big Brexit dividend, should have been taking back control of our agricultural policy. Unfortunately, we have absolutely failed to realise that opportunity. We have an element system, payment system, that is at least £1 billion short on what it needs in order for farming to be sustainable. So we need to look at increasing that budget in order to make provide farmers with a sustainable way of life, and so they can focus on food production, which is why, you know, it is absolute madness that we don't have a national food strategy in the UK. In fact, Boris Johnson did in fact get a chap called Henry Dimbleby, I think, to write one, only for it to be shoved in the bottom drawer and ignored. The Lib Dems have a national food strategy, and, you know, I believe that should be the #1 priority for any incoming government.
Thank you. We're going to stay with you with the next question, if that's okay, Edward. Immigration. So West Dorset is a welcoming area for refugees, and many have settled here and have been supported by Dorset people in the last few years. The government has only shown hostility towards those fleeing war or persecution. What is your plan for setting up safe routes for refugees and support for their resettlement in this country and county of Dorset?
Yeah, so, I mean, we used to have a very good immigration system until George Osborne came along. And the thing was, we had immigration officers in embassies around the world. So if you wanted to come to the UK, you went to your embassy and you either showed your job offer, which you could check, or you would show your qualifications, and if it was a skill set that we needed, and you had a little bit of money, we would give you leave to come here for 6 months to find employment. If you didn't, we would send you back home. And that was a very good system for us, because it meant we could pick the people that we needed to come to the UK to work in our economy. It was a very fair system for them, because it meant if you got a no, you were still in your country. You hadn't left, you weren't on the move. And then to save what was a ridiculously small amount of money in terms of government spending, we went to regional hubs. So now, if I was in Kampala, I had to get to Nairobi to get a no. I was now 3 international borders and 2,000 miles away, so I'm on the move. And then to save even less money, we went to a system of just go to Paris and get a no there. So now I'm practically in the UK. And now we have a system where the only place you can get permission to come to the UK is by getting here. So the only qualification is no longer do you have a skill we need, it's can you make the trip? And that's a ridiculous system. And what that means is it puts undue pressure on the UK, because we've cut the Home Office as well. So we're one of the few countries that can't process an immigration application in 3 months. It takes us 2.5 years. 2.5 years in which we've got to house these people and feed them, and rightly so, before we send them back. And all that's doing is sucking the capacity out of the UK's ability to provide safe housing for those people who are legitimate refugees and who do deserve our sympathy and our help to come here and flee persecution.
Thank you. Marcus, please.
So I have to say, I think Ed said a lot of it very well. What I would add to that is that this is a massive problem. I'm sure there are hundreds of millions of people who would gladly live in this country if they had half a chance. And there's absolutely no way we can deal with that quantity of people. So obviously we have to draw boundaries here. As Ed has described with that process, I think that would help hugely. I think we have to stop the boats, because this is not a sensible way of immigration for anybody. And I think we should patrol the channel with the Navy and make sure boats don't come across, and then make sure they come through in the right ways, such as Ed was describing. And I think we just need a balanced policy where we have a number of people that's not increasing the population of this country, maybe slightly decreasing. We have as many people as we can cope with in this country already. We're a very densely populated country.
Thank you. Chris, please.
So anyone just reading the question would think that we do absolutely nothing to welcome those here who are fleeing persecution, and that's just not correct. What actually we have to be very careful of here is we don't muddy the waters between those who are genuine refugees fleeing from persecution and those who are illegal immigrants. The two are very separate. Here in Dorset, only in the last few months, we, through the government, have done a huge amount to welcome refugees from Afghanistan who are at threat of losing their lives from the Taliban. And we have welcomed those people to Chickerell, where we have looked after them for up to about 6 months, sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more, before we have been able to support them in the wider community, either here or further afield. We did the same in Ukraine. We did the same in Hong Kong, and I could go on and on. Syria, of course, only a few years ago. So we, as a United Kingdom, have done and will continue to do a huge amount to support those who are fleeing persecution, as indeed I'm sure we all feel that we should. But the reality is that the situation around illegal immigration is now being morphed, and there's a grey area between the two, and they are very separate. And the rules around immigration, I think, need to be tightened, and that's why I look forward, if a Conservative government is returned, to see the Rwanda plan making a real impact in discouraging those people from coming across the English Channel.
Thank you. Kelvin, please.
My sense is that the world's becoming a more unstable place, that there's going to be more and more people fleeing war and persecution. And as the climate warms up, there's going to be people fleeing desertification, where it's no longer possible to grow food. When the ice caps start melting, whole areas of land are going to be underwater. People will be fleeing. We've got some responsibility, and bearing in mind on the responsibility, we were one of the main drivers of the Industrial Revolution that started pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We have a responsibility. Doesn't mean we need to do it all, but my point is, this is a global situation, and it needs to be addressed globally, international cooperation, to establish safe routes for people fleeing these disasters. It's only humane that we do our fair share and countries find a way of accommodating them. And I think, perhaps this is partly controversial, but one of the reasons people flee to the UK is because they speak English. Because we've colonised large parts of the world and introduced English. Now, if you were fleeing war, persecution, rising sea levels, whatever, and you spoke English, where would you want to go? Where would feel safe? Surely it would be a country that you could speak English.
Thank you. Is that everyone? Yeah. I think that's everything. Okay then, so our next question then, please. We're going to come to you first, Marcus.
Okay.
This is about ethos and values. Dorset has one of the highest child referral rates to gender clinics in England. The CAS report wants an end to children being prescribed puberty blockers and social transitioning in schools. No child should be treated in school as a member of the opposite sex. Children cannot be kept safe unless there is clarity about the sex of everyone around them. Do you agree with this?
Yes, I think I do. I'm just looking at the question. It's a very difficult area. Can I first start by saying I think we have to have a line, an age, say 18, whereby after that people are free to make decisions about their sexuality and their sex, however they want to express it. I personally feel very wary of puberty blockers. I think the only way we can actually properly answer this question is very careful and simple research, and by that I mean I don't know all the figures, but actually asking people who have taken puberty blockers and then seeing how that has affected them in later life and whether they agreed with that decision or not, and the ones that weren't allowed puberty blockers to find out how they feel in adulthood. We have to research this to answer the question and actually find out exactly how it works and whether it's a good thing or bad thing. And I don't think we should be so much led by what we feel is right. We should be led by what actually works for these people that are having these gender difficulties. So I think it needs to be research-led, the answer to this question.
Thank you. Kelvin, please.
Do you know, to be honest, I fear this question. And I fear it for the reasons as highlighted in the CAS report. It's a toxic debate. There are so many people just willing to assert their opinion, and if you assert anything slightly different, they are attacking you. And that is not the environment to sort out a very complex issue. My gut feeling is gender dysphoria is real. People experience it. We need to acknowledge it. But trying to come to a resolution during teen years, I think it's dangerous. My own personal view. By all means, speak to people, talk it through, but don't look for a resolution, trying to put a full stop on the end of it. We need to follow the evidence. We need to listen to experts. And my gut feeling here also is there just hasn't been enough debate, enough research to come up with a definitive answer to this. So I'm going to sit on the fence as much as I can, simply because I'll admit I don't know. I haven't got an answer.
Thank you. Edward, please.
So the CAS report makes 3 very important recommendations, all of which I agree with. The first is that decisions over what is appropriate medical treatment should be made by medical professionals and not politicians. The second is that we need to fund far more research. The NHS needs to fund far more research so there is a body of evidence to inform decision making. And the third is that this is a toxic debate and we need to stop using incredibly vulnerable young people for political point scoring. And there is another point that I would make, which I think is important. Children cannot be kept safe unless there is clarity about sex of people around them. That's an old trope. We've seen a lot. It's trans people are paedophiles. We used to hear the same thing about gay people. We used to hear the same thing about black people. It's rubbish.
Thank you. Chris?
So it's my opinion that this area is really all about child safeguarding than anything else. The core question was, do we agree that no child should be treated in school as a member of the opposite sex? And yes, I do agree with that statement. I don't think we should be in a situation where we allow primary school children to socially transition without the parents' knowledge, and that's okay, because I don't believe it's okay at all. Here in Dorset, as the questioner has put forward, it is true that we are in the top 10% of the NHS areas in England that refer our children to gender clinics, and there are many reasons for that. And some of those reasons are really, really unpalatable. Some of those reasons are where Dorset Council and third-party organisations like the Space Youth Project have gone into parents' homes, told the parents they can't speak, told the child a number of things about their gender identity, and not even letting the parents know, let alone asking them, they have referred that child to the Tavistock Clinic previously to go on a medical pathway. Now, when we start talking about this area, we really need to understand all the interests involved here, because the Conservative Party is very clear. We don't want it to happen. We will mandate it to happen. But in my opinion, we also need to be clear that there are large donors at play here, such as Ferring Pharmaceuticals, who have donated considerable amounts of money to the Liberal Democrats previously. And that is one of the reasons why I fear that the Liberal Democrat policy compared to the Conservative policy is very different. But it's why I'm so pleased to say, no, we should not be allowing this, definitely not in primary schools. And that's one of the reasons I've taken the steps I have as the role as the MP so far.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on now to the summing up from our candidates. Each candidate has 2 minutes to sum up to you here and to you at home. So I'm going to go along the line, and I'm going to start with Edward first, please.
Look, ultimately I think this election comes down to whether or not you want 5 more years of what you've got for the last 4.5. If you are richer, healthier, happier, then you have a party to vote for. If, like me, you are fed up to the back teeth with the corruption and the sewage and the state of the NHS and the cost of living, then please take this opportunity to vote for something different. Vote for change in West Dorset.
Okay, Calvin, please.
I would like us to start doing politics differently. And to do that, I would like to see the number of Greens in Parliament representing our support in the country. And for that to happen, we need proportional representation. So I understand people are going to vote tactically, but can we then move on and start to get an electoral system that is fit for purpose in the 21st century? That people can vote according to their heart, not just their head, and we can get all views represented in Parliament. So when a decision needs to be made, all views are taken into account. That's where we need to be moving to.
Thank you, Calvin. Marcus?
So you may ask, why on earth vote for such a tiny party and somebody who's so new to politics? How on earth could that have any influence at all? Well, I think it's probably unlikely I'll win this seat here. So again, the question arises, why vote for me? I'll tell you why. Because the more votes I have, the more leverage it gives me, the more I can go to the media and gain media attention, and I'm talking nationally here. And then I can put ideas into British politics through the media that have never been put into politics ever. As I've said, we have very radical policies, and if you read them, you will see this straight away. I'll say things that have never been said in British politics. I will ask for a completely transparent banking system across our entire economy. I will ask for a system of supreme moral law where we have simple moral laws, making things like rudeness illegal, so we introduce morality back into our society. We have many policies that completely transform the way we do politics and run our economy and all our systems. So if you vote for me, you're voting for a new force in politics. And this is crucial. If we're going to solve our problems, we need fundamental change.
Thank you. Chris, please.
So I would like to ask each and every one of you to consider voting for me on the 4th of July. That's if you haven't done already. The reason I'm asking you to do that is because I believe that words do not speak as loud as actions. And the track record that I have over the last 4.5 years has always meant that the needs of the West Dorset people have been absolutely top of my priority every single day that you sent me to Westminster. And I would like to tell you all today that that will continue if you send me back to Westminster on the 4th of July. I will commit on day one to go and get the money to finish Dorchester Hospital. I'll also commit to do continue what I've been doing with Yeovil Hospital, and to make the case for all the things that we've needed to do to make West Dorset better than it is today. I mean, we do have a choice. There's no two ways about it. But the choice is stark. The choice is between me, someone who has been your MP for the last 4.5 years, and a number of candidates that have not had that track record, and that of course will be for you to decide on the 4th of July.
Thank you. Right, well that's it. Thank you very much, everybody. It's just for my chance now to say a few thank yous to everybody. First of all, of course, thank you to our candidates for all your answers and to the questions that have been put. Thank you to our audience who have joined us this evening and to those that are online. I'd like to say thank you to Gary and Cloud Hill Productions, who has kindly supported us with the live stream of this event, and that's why it looks so great to you all back at home. Also Craig for keeping an eye on the wafting the paper and dinging the bell and the phone going off every so often, which wasn't a phone call, it was just his alarm. Thank you to those who helped arrange this evening's event, including the team from Bridport Husting for their advice and questions not asked at their event. And of course, thank you to everyone who's watching online. That's it. Thank you very much, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, Rachel.